if you're out looking for a property to rent. Oh my goodness. 20% increase in many parts of Waterford City and County. Regina Mangan, founder and managing director of Liberty Blue Estate Agents.
Good morning, Damien. Good morning, listeners.
Good morning. And your transition year student here, Jack, is in here as well.
Yeah.
How's it going?
I'm good, how are you?
Good. How are you getting on?
Good.
It's going well. Very good. We didn't think they were going to increase by so much, did we?
Yeah, I did. And I suppose, look, data again. I go back to data. All of this noise and propaganda is all based on the Daft data, which I question every single time. So here we are talking about an increase in rents of 20%. So today in Waterford City, as of 20 minutes ago, there are 11 properties advertised for rent. Of that, one is a student property, so that's 10 properties. So they're basing the whole data on 10 properties. Usually there's only 4 or 5. So first things first.
So just on that, do you think their analysis is too limited? Again, Daft would stand over everything that they say and everything they do, and they give a snapshot over time, like I suppose an opinion poll, in terms of how the figures are going.
It's not accurate data. It's not enough data. So
not enough data. Well, it would be accurate on the basis of the amount of properties that they're doing.
Okay, that's correct. Actually, it's not a true reflection of the marketplace. That is a fact.
So what would you... Well, I don't know where you're getting your figures from.
Okay, so the first thing is...
how are you disputing Daft's figures?
Well, I can tell you a snapshot of 350 properties that we manage. A one-bed rent is between 800 and 850. A two-bed is between 950 and 1,000. And a three-bed, €1,200. The RTB...
That's the residential...
That is the only data that should be used. And the government needs to step up and provide accurate data.
Okay, so with that in mind, what do you think the rent increase is?
Well, within the rent pressure zone, most of Waterford is, not all, but the majority of Waterford City is, and you can only increase rent by 2%. However, there are some properties advertised with some rents that I would question the legitimacy of those rents. So I've already challenged Daft that they should have a system to check if the person is charging an illegal rent on Daft. I noticed one this morning myself, which I won't be highlighting, which is definitely, I won't say definitely, is most likely not falling within the rent pressure zone rules. Okay. So most people conform to the rules and then some people don't. So it means that if you've rented out a property for €1,000, the next rent can only go up by 2%. We've been asked by landlords to charge market rent. What's market rent? Well, we want 2,000. Well, we can't because that's breaking the law. And I've challenged Daft on that and they said they've no mechanism because they're there to provide a service for the consumer. I said I dispute that because your data is actually driving government decision and making the general public vicious, I would say, towards landlords.
Okay, so Daft.ie is a private company.
Yes.
And they obviously make money collating information and putting information out there, and they have a certain pedigree and a certain history, and they're there quite a long while. What increase do you think is there? Like, they're saying that rents in Waterford City have risen by 20% in the last year. You're saying you don't think that's correct at all. Okay. So what do you think it's risen by?
I think the messaging is inaccurate. I think they need to say a percentage of rentals have increased and these are new rentals. Okay. Now, if a property owner decides to revamp an old property and turn it into new apartments, they can actually start renting at a different market rent. In other words, the 2% legislation doesn't apply.
So do you think there has only been, on average, again, we don't know the figures. What are the RTB saying regarding the figures?
Like, the RTB don't provide data. They're not fit for purpose.
So again, I've asked you, sorry, this is the third time asking it.
Okay.
And if you don't know the answer, that's absolutely fine. Because I'm getting from you, Regina, that we don't know the answer because the figures are not out there. So again,
okay, I'll give you I can tell you of 350 properties, our rents increase on average of 2 to 4%.
2 to 4%.
Right? And the 2% are those within the rent pressure zone, and then the other is outside that. So that our data does not tie in, and also the data that the Institute of Auctioneers and Valuers wouldn't tie in with that. I'm not saying that the Daft data is wrong. It's not presented.
It's presented in a certain way based on a very small grouping of rental, I suppose, examples is what you're saying.
Yeah, and the other thing that I don't like to see on Daft is I don't like to see call Joe on this number, right? Like,
who's Joe?
Who's Joe? Who's Joe? Like Joe? Who's Joe? But
am I Joe?
They've like, for all we know, it could be somebody who is illegally trying to rent property, who's not working within the same playing field as the rest of us. It's such a serious matter now.
What is Joe? This is the first I've heard about this.
Random people can put their ad up on Daft and just say, Joe, call this number.
All right.
And we don't know who Joe is. The tenant doesn't know who Joe is.
Right.
And there's no...
Joe is supposed to be a landlord, is he?
He might be. He might be.
Have you ever tried to call Joe?
No, because that's not my job.
Yeah.
That's the job of the politicians on the ground who are talking about the situation. Like, at the moment, right, we have 11 properties to rent in all of Waterford City. That is not enough to supply the demand. Now, there's an embargo on notices to quit until the end of March, which means that should this be lifted on the 1st of April, we will have more problems. We will have more landlords exiting the market. So we're seeing people entering the market maybe who don't operate with the same principles as many other landlords. And that's the point I'm trying to get across.
And the point you made at the start of this interview, I think, was very strong, on the basis that you're saying that some of these reports, in terms of rental increases and percentages, drive and dictate government policy.
Correct.
In what way?
Well, it's propaganda. So everybody today is talking about, on every channel, about the rent increases. And as a client, a customer of Daft, you receive the press release in advance to the media. So I received it last night, and the first thing I looked at and I saw was that the highest increases were in Waterford City. And I threw my eyes up to heaven, because it's the same conversation every time we have it. So they're creating data that is not a true reflection of the entire market. Well, it incites people, and now the politicians
we will get in touch. We will, on behalf of Daft, we will refute that allegation, and we'll get in touch with Daft to ask them about this, because they should have right to reply, because that's a very serious accusation.
Sure, of course you can.
So on this...
But I'd like you to invite Pat David from the Institute of Auctioneers and Valuers.
100%, because I'd like to investigate this, because on the basis of what Daft are saying, and as I say, they've got a long-standing record, long-standing history on this, and if they are not getting as wide a percentage, I suppose, of properties into their mix, then they have to be questioned about that 100%. So with that in mind, can I ask you, is it possible for rents to increase in Waterford by 20% if we have a rent pressure zone in Waterford?
Legally, no.
Legally, no.
Absolutely not.
So this reported 20% increase, you're saying that that's an illegal increase?
In some cases it is, yeah, because I've seen properties on the
So maybe they're right in some cases.
The information that Daft are putting out, I've no doubt, is accurate based on the data they're assessing.
Exactly.
So let's be clear about that.
Yeah.
I am not saying for a minute that they are telling lies.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is it is not a true reflection of the entire rental market. And so on that basis, it suggests landlords are all greedy. The general perception, sure, aren't you getting 20% more than you ever got before? That is not correct.
And that's the next thing I wanted to focus on, 100%, because if you're saying it's driving government policy, it's also then, I suppose, reinforcing some people's perceptions of the greedy landlord. So you believe that this kind of information
It's dangerous.
does very serious damage to landlords.
It does. I was on RT not too long ago and I challenged the Minister for Housing on this. And I said it's high time that the RTB, which is a government body in terms of, like the RTB is great for charging now annual registrations for landlords. The technical platform they have is actually not fit for purpose because it takes so long. It's frustrating agents, it's frustrating landlords. And they need to be providing the data that drives decisions.
And why don't they, Regina? In all the years that you were involved in property and letting estate agencies, and why does the government not collate this information? Why do they leave it up to a private company to do it?
Well, Daft are right to provide it because it's giving them a platform.
Yeah, but why, again, why doesn't the government do this?
Well, I could ask that question about many departments within the government.
Well, and specifically on this, in your experience, is there any reason why you think the government...
Well, there's a lack of accountability here. There's a lack of accountability.
On whose part?
Well, on the RTB, it's not fit for purpose. All the agents are frustrated over the RTB platform, and the Institute of Auctioneers and Valuers, IPAV, which I'm a member of, have addressed these issues with the RTB, and they're basically not taking accountability. I can't run a private enterprise the way they RTB run their organisation.
The Irish Times, exiting landlords linked to 21,000 property transactions last year, agents say. That's Sherry Fitzgerald estimated some 21,000 property transactions last year involving investors exiting the market. The departure of smaller landlords on the back of high taxes and complex tenancy laws has been cited as one of the main drivers of undersupply in the rental market. Is there any chance or sign that we're going to be increasing supply in Waterford City and County?
Well, there are measures that the government could take, but look,
they have brought in quite a few measures. We've had John Cummins on regularly about different things here, about they're trying to make sure that they keep as many landlords in the market as possible. Are any of those measures working in your opinion?
The measures that government are bringing in to keep landlords in place are an embarrassment. And in my view, and many people within the business, the government make decisions based on public demand. So if you can imagine, if all this propaganda goes out there, the data isn't, I suppose, reflective of the true picture. People are angry, and rightly so, because there are no places to live, and it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. We rely on the private landlord for supply at the moment, so they're all going out of the marketplace. I mean, the Minister of Housing gave a credit.
They're not all going out of the marketplace.
A huge 40% of our sales last year were landlords exiting the market. And there's a number of reasons that they're exiting. Government are not making any meaningful change. So they're giving credit for a washing machine. I'm sorry, that's actually a joke as far as I'm concerned.
What do you mean a credit for a washing machine?
There's a tax write-off if you buy a washing machine as a landlord. I mean, that's not enough. Like, they're paying at least 52. I thought it was a joke when I saw it. So if they're talking about change, credit for a washing machine, I'm sorry. It's
they're doing
change.
a lot more now. I could go through some of the other things that they say that they're doing.
Okay, well, you often ask me, well, what would I do if I was Minister for Housing? Well, there's one thing, right? They if you buy a property, an investment property, you are entitled to up to €10,000 for the refurbishment. But the property has to be vacant for 6 months. Does that not fly in the face of the whole concept of occupying property? If you buy a property and it needs a significant investment to bring it up to great quality standards that the tenants deserve, then give the credit straight away. Why wait 6 months? I know loads of people in that situation, so it's not fit for purpose, right? That tax credit. The rent pressure zone, that's a huge impact. So you have the rent pressure zone, then you have landlords, some people who are advertising new properties breaking the law. Okay, so that skews the figures. Some of the people that I mentioned, one I saw today, I thought on the Dunmore Road, I questioned that rent. Is it in line? I don't know, I don't facts. Is it in line with the last rent?
So with that in mind,
landlords are only getting €500 a month for their rental property.
With that in mind then, if there's anybody out there looking to rent, to actually get a property, what advice would you have for them in terms of getting in touch with individual, I suppose, letting agencies, with the Residential Tenancies Board? Is it just literally a case of, again, just looking around?
Well, the first thing is, if you are renting and you see a private person advertising, like we'll say Joe or Mary, no surname, make sure you're very vigilant about who you hand over your money to, because there's quite a few scams going on. And that's why I feel, in terms of money laundering and scamming, that's why I feel platforms and portals have an obligation to actually do their due diligence on the people advertising. I feel really strongly about that. And then in terms of anybody looking to rent, it's a bit like going for a job at the moment. I'm sorry. You have to put best foot forward. You need your references. You need your information together. And sorry, if you've got dogs, no offence, but if there's 60 people queuing up for one property and, you know, someone's got dogs, then unfortunately they fall down the bottom of the list.
Is that legal?
Yes, you can't actually. The government came up with a great idea. We used to take pet deposits and references for the pets, but now you can't take a deposit for a pet. So if the dog chews up all the furniture, you have you don't have sufficient deposit to cover it. So the landlord is entitled to choose the tenant, and you might say it's discriminating against the dogs, but that is a stupid legislation to bring in no pet deposit.
So they might have signs up saying no dogs may apply.
Do you know, it's very sad. It really is, because a roof over our head is a primary need, and if the government make all this changes to legislation, and this anti-landlords sentiment is still so prevalent out there, have they got an alternative to the private landlord? And the answer, I can categorically tell you, is no.
Regina Mangan, thank you very much for joining me this morning.
Thank you very much.
Best of luck with your work experience, Jack. And as I say, we'll get in touch with Daft and put these questions
and
to them.
IPAV, please, for the other side.
We will, certainly. Thank you very much. Regina Mangan, thank you very much.
Deja Today with Damien Teirnan on WLR.
Sound of Waterford, WLRFM.